Welcome to the CCN podcast, where we discuss the latest trends, companies, and people shaping the cryptocurrency space. I'm your host, Jake Sylvester. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the 11th episode of the CCN podcast. First up, some housekeeping. The last episode we released was actually a pretty awesome interview I did with Caitlin Long of the Wyoming Blockchain Coalition. It's actually pretty pertinent to some of the price movements we're going to talk about today, and her ideas around what could happen if the Intercontinental Exchange, which owns the New York Stock Exchange, and by extension Bakkt, enter the market, are incredibly interesting. I'll be doing a pretty big follow-up post on that interview, just explaining her concerns and really diving into some more details on how the stock market works, clearing houses, and how that could affect crypto, that I definitely recommend you check out. If that's up when we release the episode, I will put that in the show notes. If you are listening to this later in the week, it's almost definitely going to be up, so definitely check it out. So this week we're going to go over some of the newer price movements in the cryptocurrency market, namely the non-parallel price movements we've seen with Bitcoin and Ethereum, the 9 Bitcoin ETF rejections that occurred this week, Tether's habit of printing money to the tune of $415 million in August alone, Steve Wozniak, the Apple co-founder, joining a crypto startup. And finally, we're going to finish up with an interview with Minds.com founder Bill Ottman, who is actually hosting a token sale this week. So first up, Bitcoin's price movements. This is one of the first weeks that we've seen Bitcoin not moving in parallel to Ethereum in a while. So normally when Bitcoin goes up, Ethereum goes up or stays relatively flat, and the coin market capitalization moves with that. Now, recently, we've seen a couple exceptions, but this is something that analysts have noted heavily this week. So Bitcoin is up 6%, Ethereum is down 5%, and the entire coin market cap is up 3%. Now, these non-parallel price movements are important, according to analysts, because they present a more mature market. I mean, on a modern stock market, you don't have all the stocks moving up together or down together. And this definitely is making some people more bullish, even in the face of the 9 ETF rejections we've seen this week. So Bitcoin has displayed more resilience in taking these 9 ETF rejections than it did with the second ETF rejection of the Winklevoss's application a few weeks ago, which some have argued started a lot of this whole bearish sentiment. And we also have some external factors contributing to bullish sentiment. First of all, a lot of people are aware that strong dollar exchange rates are contributing to price suppression across the market. A lot of traders are looking at the market as a whole in USD fiat to whatever currency. So a strong dollar can definitely have a negative psychological effect. One of the interesting things about the dollar is a lot of people forget that it is a currency, just like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and it might be less volatile, but price movements in the dollar itself do have a heavy impact on not just cryptocurrency markets, but markets all over the world. So next up, ETF approval is anticipated in the next 18 months. We've had a lot of these applications go out, and the SEC is saying the same thing every time. Basically, they're saying, well, Bitcoin is too prone to price manipulation, and, you've analysts and the ETF applicants disagreeing. But a lot of analysts think that this is going to go away as a concern over the next 18 months as the SEC gets more comfortable and is able to watch Bitcoin a little more. The final reason a lot of people are bullish on this is the entrance of Bakkt. Again, if you have not heard it yet, I highly recommend you check out my episode with Caitlin Long. That is episode 10. We go over a lot of what Bakkt means and who they are. But for now, Bakkt is a new crypto digital asset exchange that is started by the Intercontinental Exchange, which owns the New York Stock Exchange, a giant conglomerate that processes tons of trading volume in stocks, securities, bonds, and just a really old established player that really knows how to work on and in the U.S. regulatory environment. As I said at the beginning of this episode, I'm putting out a deep dive on the New York Stock Exchange and really how clearing got started. And if there's one thing that the New York Stock Exchange has been great at throughout its history, which dates back, 2 centuries, it is getting through regulation and shaping regulation. So if it's in their interest to have looser cryptocurrency regulations that allow for a Bitcoin ETF, myself and analysts are confident that it will come about. Speaking of things that are not so good for the market, Tether keeps printing money. In August alone, Tether has pumped out $415 million, including $100 million this week. This caused the price of Bitcoin to jump $300 in 1 minute. Now, Tether printing money isn't in and of itself bad, but people are suspicious when this company starts churning out this much money. It just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't sit well with people. Next up this week, legendary Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak is joining the board of a crypto startup called Equi. This is an interesting choice considering Wozniak's comments in the past about Bitcoin and blockchain. So Wozniak said that Bitcoin is amazing, but blockchain is a bubble. The company he's working for now is a blockchain investment company. The choice of an investing company is also somewhat weird, considering Wozniak's reputation for not caring about money and being more of a free-spirited hacker type than someone who would be interested in financial tech. Nonetheless, it's definitely a big step forward to have a legendary thought leader like Wozniak coming out and not just supporting Bitcoin and blockchain, but actually working for a company in the industry. Next up this week, Nvidia is leaving crypto. If you'll remember, we've talked a lot about Nvidia and how they've made a lot of money in this space. So it's an odd choice for them to leave, and their CFO explained it as them seeing cryptocurrency revenue declining to 100 million and just not seeing a ton of growth in the space. This is odd considering Bitmain. So Bitmain managed to make $1.1 billion in quarter one, which is exactly double the $550 million made by Nvidia. So when they're backing out of a space like this, it just seems like they're giving up and ceding the entire proof of work market to Bitmain, which is raising tons of money and has an IPO ahead of them. So a lot of people have just interpreted this as a very foolish move to bet against cryptocurrency when you have such a well-capitalized competitor coming out really soon. Finally, this week, we have an interview with the founder of Minds.com. Minds.com is the first crypto social network that behaves in a way similar to Facebook. So it's less of a Steemit type medium community, and it's more of a newsfeed, post, pictures. We talk about a lot of the technical challenges behind building something in a decentralized manner that's going to scale the way Facebook did. We tackle how Facebook lost the trust of its users and what the social network market is going to look like going forward. So finally, Minds.com is having a crowd sale this week over at minds.com/token. Only reason I'd mention this is we didn't get to it in the interview, and I think it's super relevant. Enjoy the interview, and as always, let us know what you think. Hey everybody, I'm here with Bill Bill Ottman of Minds.com. How you doing today, Bill?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me.
So explain to us a little bit about what Minds is.
So Minds is an open source social networking platform that leverages cryptocurrency, and we're very focused on internet freedom and decentralization, moving towards that at least. And so basically the way that it works is you earn tokens for your contributions to the network every day based on engagement you receive from like upvotes and comments and shares, referrals you make, check-ins, and then you can use your tokens, which are ERC20 tokens on Ethereum. You can use those to boost your post for more views, sort of like a meritocratic reward system. So right now, one token will give you 1,000 views. Or you can send them peer-to-peer to other users and subscribe to them monthly for exclusive content or other rewards that they set, or as a tip. And you can get premium features. So the tokens are essentially the fuel of the network. And we've just been trying to flip what traditional social media networks are doing on its head, invading people's privacy, manipulating algorithms, and the rest. So we're just trying to do it in a better way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how has the reception been from users? You guys started back when?
We launched our alpha mobile apps in 2015.
Between 2015 and now, with the scandals that have unfolded, Cambridge Analytica, the Russian election scandal, how has that changed, the way users feel about Minds?
I mean, every one of these scandals just feeds the fire for alternatives to emerge, and we're seeing a bunch of them emerge. In 2015, we had the Snowden leaks, the NSA surveillance. So that caused, our initial surge because we, support the right to anonymity and we have encryption features. So, people were pretty excited about that. We also, obviously don't share anyone's data or would never sell it or anything like that. So, it's crazy. Day after day, Google, Facebook, all of them are just dropping the ball, and it's like there's brilliant people there, so I don't understand how they keep doing this.
Yeah, and I guess they really differ a lot from you, right? I mean, your only real system for paying for attention is just attention overall, right? I give one token and I can boost a post to 1,000 people. Facebook and Google, you could target. I'm going to go after political conservatives living in the middle of the country that like Donald J. Trump on Facebook.
Right. I think that targeting, so we obviously do not by default target, but I think that, our philosophy is more of a consent-based system. So I think that we actually are going to be rolling in more targeting features, but the key is that by default, when you sign up, you're not being targeted, and you will only be targeted if you want to be targeted. And that wouldn't be surveillance-based. That would be you basically just clicking categories that you want to be fed boosts of. I think that the tracking by default, Facebook is following you around all, in your browser, even other sites that you're on, everywhere you're going, they're following you. So tailored results and algorithms are not inherently evil. I think it just has to do with the consensual nature of the tech.
Well, it's interesting. If you look at Facebook's patents, it's almost like Q from James Bond. It's like, we're going to take over restaurants' Wi-Fi networks and see where people are going. We're going to track you on other sites through cookies, tracking pixels. I mean, it's just the natural extension of how much can we learn about a user and how can we monetize that.
Yeah, and we saw, I forget the name of one of their heads of product or something, Boz, or I want to say it was, who it got exposed that, these memos that he wrote that were just growth at all costs. And, that's just what they didn't care. It was like every piece of data that they could get to better target and increase revenue and increase user acquisition. It worked, but it's very short term. And now they're feeling the blowback, and so that's why they're losing millions of active users, and their stock's plummeting. And I think it was very impatient of them to do that.
Yeah, so when you guys got started, was it with this philosophy of, Facebook's broken, Google's broken, and this decentralization opens up a whole new way to run a social network?
Yeah, I mean, they're broken in their foundational principles. I think the tech, what they are good at is design and engineering. The principles are backwards. So, it's all proprietary software. No one can inspect it. No one can see what's going on. We can't leverage it. We can't build on top of it. They share some back-end tools, open source, but nothing major. And they're changing the algorithm. They took away everybody's reach. You used to be able to reach all your followers on Facebook. Now you're only reaching like 5% organically, and their newsfeed algorithm is deciding based on thousands of different variables what people are going to see. They even got exposed a few years ago for working secretly with Princeton and doing mood experiments. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was crazy.
That was crazy. I mean, that is the definition of mind control, essentially. And it's not that, it's like some super secret conspiracy. It's just that they have transparency issues. They've completely lost their way in terms of connecting with the community, being community driven, caring about, the user has to come first. So, yeah, I mean, we had pages on Facebook with millions of followers, and we were firsthand seeing the algorithms destroy our reach. We used to drive a lot of traffic from Facebook and generate ad revenue and whatnot, but that's actually a broken model because, first of all, you're relying on third-party social networks for your traffic. They could cut that out from underneath you any day. And you're putting spy bots, essentially, on your site, which are tracking all your users, which is generating revenue. So the whole media publishing industry has a crisis that sort of no one wants to talk about, which is putting these Google ads and all the other ones into their sites. And, you'll see the most hypocritical things. Like you'll see a Guardian article that is complaining about surveillance. Meanwhile, it has a Google ad in the page.
My favorite's the New York Times because their audience retargeting is the most blatant I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So for everyone who's not familiar, audience retargeting is basically where you'll dump out the database of your website with emails, and I can say, oh, these people were active subscribers, now they're not. And then I can target ads based on that. And everyone does it. It's almost suicide not to. But you have a lot of companies that are claiming to be decentralized that are using this to drive revenue.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a utopian vision of decentralization. We don't claim to be fully decentralized. I think that very few places can actually claim that. We have decentralized aspects of our stack and want to move much faster in that direction. So right now, the whole token is obviously on the Ethereum blockchain, and we publish certain transactions, advertising transactions, to the blockchain. So you can advertise on-chain or off-chain. That's how we deal with some of the scalability. Also, for the peer-to-peer transactions, that can be on-chain or off-chain. We prefer people do on-chain, but the gas prices in Ethereum are preventing some of them from wanting to do that. We also use WebTorrent for our video serving, which essentially leverages everyone's browser for bandwidth when there's a really viral video. Really cool piece of tech. Blockchain is not the only decentralization tool. I think that there's a lot of buzz, and it's essential, but there's also really cool projects that we're tracking, like DAT and IPFS and Beaker browser. This is really moving towards more of a peer web, which is super exciting. It's all very immature, but we're balancing having a user-friendly network that feels like the major networks, can scale, can handle a lot of traffic, and at the same time is moving more into that distributed direction. So I think that other cool decentralization projects like Diaspora or Mastodon, they're great. But the problem is that with the node node model is good, and we're actually going to be playing with that federation stuff so you can have a network of networks sort of intercommunicating. But when people go to a small node and there's not much going on, it's hard to get the project to really scale. You need people to join the network and have, it feel like a major network, and there be tons of activity happening there. And then you can sort of educate people about these other sort of deeper issues.
And I think beyond that, you guys are probably facing some very real technology challenges. I mean, I think Facebook on their engineering blog said that every page request has at least 1,000 servers involved. So, I mean, just talk a little bit about even the process of like loading a news feed, right? If I'm on Facebook, I have 5,000 friends. I like, 100,000 pages. I'm being ad retargeted by a million companies. So what are some of the technology challenges you guys have faced as you've tried to duplicate this news feed in a decentralized way?
Well, we're not. We can't really claim to be too decentralized with regards to the news feed, to be perfectly honest. I think that hopefully we can get there, but even just, serving newsfeed posts to channels with hundreds of thousands of subscribers in a centralized way is not an easy technical challenge. So, but we're looking at all of the different projects. Like there's ETH has been gaining some traction. Yep. That's really interesting. There's one called. There's Steemit. Steemit's quite centralized though, and actually PeepETH has centralized components too. So it's not fully decentralized. Like they still have an app, but it's I think mostly about integrity and look, where are you moving in the right direction? What's your intent? And hopefully a lot of these networks can work together actually, and we can intercommunicate. There's a cool protocol called ActivityPub, which is sort of a federation system so that you can cross-post between networks. And I think we have to work more collaboratively. And, the next Facebook and Google's not going to be like Facebook or Google. It's going to be a lot of different networks.
Yeah, I mean, the technology challenges facing decentralized projects as they start to scale, right, are going to be huge. I mean, even if you look at how Facebook scaled up, they're at the point now where they have a 99.9% cache hit rate in their memory cache, right? Which essentially means that in that RAM on their servers, 99.99% of the time, they're able to hit that in memory without going into a server. So, I mean, Facebook's scaling problems have taken the entire life of the company to solve. And they're still solving them now that they're at...
Yeah, same with Twitter. I mean, you're just starting to not see the
blue whale.
Blue whale, yeah. And look, Slack goes down once in a while. No one's invincible. And I think that what is unfortunate is with the big tech companies, Facebook says they clearly are starting a blockchain initiative. But I don't think that there's enough goodwill getting put into these types of conversations. Even if you watched all the Cambridge Analytica hearings with Zuckerberg, it was just so half-hearted. And he was just playing legalese and denying things and just not being honest.
Yep.
And I don't think any of them are. And that's with regards to the algorithms, the surveillance, the censorship. It's they're just not willing to have truly honest conversations because I think that they know that they have betrayed people. And once you've done that, it's tough to fix it.
And I mean, let's face it, Facebook's blockchain initiative could be a way to lower infrastructure costs.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, one of the greatest parts about a fully decentralized internet, in theory, is you can have users serving up content to each other and not having... I think Facebook's infrastructure costs are $1 or $2 per user, which is insane.
Absolutely. There's full business reason to pursue, even if from a greedy sense.
Yep.
To be trying to offload some of the computing to the users. So, And there's incentivization you can add into that. You can build that into your retention model as a reward system to keep people around. I'm surprised they weren't doing it sooner. It's not easy, is the thing. And, most likely Facebook is going to roll out some sort of a proprietary blockchain system, though, which is still missing the point.
Yep.
Which is why Coinbase misses the point. Coinbase is a great product, but they miss the point because it's not open source. Taking something as beautiful as blockchain and, all the other revolutionary free and open source projects and just making your version proprietary, people can do what they want to do, and I think that you have the freedom to do that, but if it's an open source license, not a free software license. But I just urge people in this realm to not be worried about people stealing their ideas. Mm-hmm. It took us a couple years to open source all our code, but you have that fear, like, wow, is someone going to come and take it? But they just don't. And especially if you use a cool license like the AGPL v3,
yep.
Which, if anyone takes it and changes it, they have to show you the changes. And so it becomes this much more global collaborative effort. And that is what we need to be working on, because if any of the major social networks had done that, we wouldn't have had to spend and other initiatives like us wouldn't have had to spend the last few years building this, because we could have built on top of what they were building and made what they were building better and leverage them.
I mean, that's a fair point, but at the same time, when you look at the amount of code and the complexity that Facebook's writing, again, from their engineering blog, I think they're committing like 10 gigabytes of code a day. Mm-hmm. So one of the problems that, these open source projects like Reddit face...
Reddit's not even open source anymore, but...
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they were open source for a while, and the reasons they cited, which have been criticized a ton, were, our code base has evolved into 85 different repositories, some of which are private, some of which aren't. And at the end of the day, your average, actually most developers aren't even going to be able to build the system. So is that something you're worried about, losing that contributorship as your code base starts to evolve and just fan out as you guys scale?
No, not really. I mean, I think getting contributors is not an easy thing in itself. Being open source is about the principle of, giving your users the ability to inspect what they're interacting with. Because if you're not able to inspect what you're interacting with, then you don't know if it's respecting your freedom. So, I think that there's a difference between maintaining an active open source community that, developers are using all that. That's one level that you don't even necessarily have to go to that level.
Yep.
They could just have it public so people can see what's going on, and not necessarily pay as much. It's their right to just pay attention to their own product and not worry about supporting other versions of Reddit or whatnot. But I think that inevitably, and this is part of why we started Minds, because we knew that inevitably there was going to emerge a free and open source social networking platform. It's just gonna happen. So the same way it happened with Wikipedia, it's happening with Bitcoin. Bitcoin would never be what it is if it wasn't open source.
Yeah.
And you can have a successful proprietary project, but as long as it's proprietary, there's going to be something open source that's just lurking. And if it can gain mass enough adoption, then I think people will typically choose the more transparent option.
Have you guys seen that with Mind's daily active user growth and some of those key metrics there, as Facebook has been exposed as this kind of evil behemoth that you guys have started to grow more?
Yeah, it's like a direct connection. Every time this happens, we see surges because people are just searching alternatives to Facebook and Twitter. And so they're creating their competition. I think that it would probably be impossible for one of them to do it because it would be such a leap of faith. But if any of the major social networks were to become free and open source, I think that they would ice their position and no one would be able to mess with them. Like if Twitter did that, developers would go crazy. They would love it. And when you have that's why Bitcoin is so powerful, because it has some of the smartest people on the planet behind it. And they're behind it because they can leverage it themselves. So if you have the developers on your side, then you have, an edge.
It's interesting you mentioned Twitter, right? Because you have this interesting phenomenon where you have Jack Dorsey, who's the CEO of both Twitter and Square now. And Square is incredibly bullish on Bitcoin, crypto as a whole. And you have Twitter, that's this closed behemoth, Facebook-like network. So what do you think is going through his head as he's not...
why isn't Twitter cryptofied?
I would say Twitter's cryptofied. The question is why it's not based on crypto.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, there's plenty of crypto talk. There's plenty of crypto Twitter going on. But I don't know. I think that it's just a half-baked and sort of, honestly, a little bit of a fearful strategy that they have. I mean, even Square and like Stripe and these other payment platforms that are playing around with Bitcoin, none of them are open source. I honestly don't understand. It seems like only the fully crypto projects are really dedicated to staying open source. And you could still get kicked off Square if you have beliefs that are contrary to what Square wants, which is the same thing that's happening on Twitter. So, and it's not even about endorsing those beliefs. It's just more about the principle of
free speech.
Free speech, yeah.
So I guess that's one of the issues that you guys in every open network are going to run into. So we were talking about Augur a few episodes, and one of the things that happened on Augur, which is this prediction marketplace, is you had assassination markets crop up,
right?
Which basically said someone will get a payout if Donald Trump is assassinated, which creates an assassination market.
Right.
So one of the problems with decentralized networks as a whole is you can't really draw the line anywhere. So what are your thoughts on that? And how do you, as a executive at Minds, kind of control that?
Yeah, that is the paradox. I mean, there's the beauty and the horror of it, and you can't delete things from the blockchain. You can't censor, and so that is an incredible achievement for free speech. But it's also full of risk with all kinds of illegal activity. So that's why we're taking more of a hybrid approach. But I think that fully decentralized network, I think you kind of have to get past the harshness of like what happened on Augur or what happens on other distributed systems. I mean, I remember when people were freaking out about, you could publish child porn to the Bitcoin blockchain. But then I forget who was saying it, maybe in a New York Times article, that you could theoretically encode child porn into an advertisement in the New York Times. It was a coin. What's the Ethereum crypto law? They're lawyer advocates for crypto.
I don't know.
I'll think of it. But anyway, you could run an ad in the New York Times with an encoded child porn image, and no one would know because it's just in the pixels. So it matters, and I think that you want to take proper measures to maintain a responsible and safe community, but there's equal danger on both sides. That's why you see organizations like Tor and Electronic Frontier Foundation and, all of the main internet freedom advocates. Just, you can't compromise. I think that once you go over the line, you're now into the gray area of subjectivity and bias, and, your personal opinion about what should or should not be taken down now comes into the equation, as opposed to not being able to. And this is where, the takedowns on Twitter are so inconsistent. There's so much offensive stuff on Twitter. There's so many calls for violence from terrorist groups, but meanwhile, other types of content are getting taken down. They're not being consistent, and they're clearly playing political games. I mean, Dorsey just said that they lean left, clearly, and he, which is fine. They can do whatever they want, but I think that for us, even on the centralized end of our app, we've just taken the policy stance that as long as it's lawful in the U.S., it can be on the site. So that gives us less overhead with having to make all these subjective decisions. Granted, you're still going to see some, pretty wild stuff sometimes, but we have good filtering tools in place so you can totally control your experience. And I mean, even Tumblr takes that kind of approach. Yeah. Which is so much easier and healthy. And this whole idea that censoring makes a safer community, honestly, that's up in the air. I wrote a paper for the Next Web a couple months ago that went through all of the empirical studies looking at the effects of censorship, and most of the studies show that it radicalizes whatever is being censored further. Yep. It can cause increased violence. There's a Streisand effect. Trolls freak out. It makes them just furious. And it causes just a festering and fermentation of those ideas. I mean, this is just sort of theory on prohibition in general, beyond just online. It extends to, drugs and all different books, book burning. So I think that the data actually shows that censorship doesn't even work. So I think we need to have a more mature public conversation between all the major networks about what works. Let's look at the data and understand, okay, how do we actually solve these social problems that we want to solve? And I think that we already kind of know what that would show.
But one of the problems you have to be worried about, or at least I definitely would be if I was in your position, is Twitter really starts cracking down on the alt-right, a lot of these racist groups, and then they kind of flood over to your network.
It's a tiny percentage. I mean, first of all, they're still all over Twitter. Yeah. Twitter can't just purge the alt-right. Yeah. They take down 5 accounts that are most politically harmful to them, and then they leave the rest. And, they also... So, I mean, we don't have that much... It has a lot to do with tone. Yeah. That you express as, the leadership of a network and, in the messaging of the network. People are much more likely to maintain respectful tone if they know that they're not at risk of being silenced. So I think that people are particularly offensive on those networks because they know that, they're at risk of being taken away. I repeat this in too many interviews, but Daryl Davis, who, has gained mainstream attention, was an African-American man who confronted hundreds of members of the KKK, became friends with them, got them all to leave through just discourse, talking, dialogue. And that's just, I think, how problems get solved. So, and we just have to look at history for that. And look at the backlash. What does Twitter want? They want a fully left-wing network? I don't think that they want that. And, on Facebook, you have Peter Thiel, who's I think he's still on the board of Facebook, which is an odd thing because he's sort of the right-wing outlier.
The only right-wing. And he left Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Very publicly.
Because he's aware of these issues. That's why he's engaging crypto harder. I think he backed earn.com. Yep. And, so we're just seeing the gravity move towards incentivized networks with more speech, and I don't think that can really be stopped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a refreshing idea in a time where, everything's being censored. Mm-hmm. Everything seems to offend someone, mm-hmm. right or left.
Yep.
And that's probably what's propelled a lot of your growth.
Yeah. I mean, people look at the coordination between all of the networks with some of these takedowns. I mean, it's almost like there's this social pressure that the networks feel like because other people are advocating taking this stuff down, this stuff is so offensive, they're just scared of the public backlash from the press if they don't do it. But that is a bullying tactic, which is it's hurting them. Twitter started off as they had their biggest growth calling themselves the free speech wing of the free speech party. Same with Reddit. And actually, Reddit is interesting because there was a recent event where Huffman, I think is his name, is the CEO or the president, one of the founders.
Yeah, Ohanian Hoffman, yeah.
Yep. And so he did an AMA, and someone asked him, are racists allowed on Reddit? And he said, well, yeah, of course. And then the media goes, oh my God, how could you say that? And, that was, first of all, a good answer advocating freedom. Like, people unfortunately have that right. It sucks, but they do. And he knew that because it's Reddit and they have tons of trolls, and he knows the troll mentality.
Yep.
And he knows that it doesn't, it just makes him more pissed if you ban him. But then he came back after the media went crazy and said, well, actually, let me rephrase. Racists are not welcome on Reddit, but they're allowed. So, he just sort of rephrased it, again, changing the corporate tone.
Yep.
But still understanding that you can't, this is the internet. It's where do you draw the line? You ban them from website. What do you then ban them from having a bank account?
Yep.
If someone has a controversial opinion, it just is never ending, and it's really dangerous.
And the other problem, I think, with banning the left if you're the right and the right if you're the left, the pendulum has a way of swinging back. So for a long time, you had racists suppressing free speech of minorities because it was going to, disturb the peace. Mm-hmm. And now you have some of it the other way around. And the problem is, once that precedent's in place, the pendulum can swing back, and the people who advocate for free speech, for not having free speech, end up being suppressed by the law that they pushed to create because they were in power when it was created.
That's it. And it's already happening. I mean, Telesur just got their page banned from Facebook. That's a socialist Venezuelan state-sponsored media company.
Yep.
I mean, so that's clearly showing that the algorithms, which are sweeping the content and just blanket banning stuff, which is a whole other issue of the AI and algorithms handling the censorship. But, Wired wrote a really good piece about censorship affecting LGBTQ communities. This is not a political issue. Even though people want to turn it into that, it's really just a human rights thing.
Yep. Right to free speech.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy that it's gotten to the point where, it's a debate, but the pendulum's gonna swing.
Yep.
And then people are gonna realize it, and hopefully the big networks realize it. It's gonna be tough because they've already taken these hardline stances, banning people, and now if they let people back, then, it's just gonna show their hypocrisy. But there comes a point where you just have to fess up and say, oh, we messed up.
Yeah. Otherwise, you get into these situations where, just to use a political analogy, right? Mm-hmm. Obama strengthens the power of the executive order. The right's like, what the hell? And then Trump starts using the executive order, and the left is like, you can't do that. The pendulum always swings, and that's just something I don't think people on either side of any issue understand.
Yeah, you got to check out a post that Vitalik Buterin posted yesterday on Twitter talking about, it's a cartoon, it's like an Imgur cartoon of the process of just sort of shallow debate, and when you have rational thinkers who are steel manning each other, the opposite of straw man, trying to strengthen each other's argument, really look at the evidence on both sides, what makes sense. I'm not, not playing politics versus just tribalism. And it's just a hilarious comic.
Yeah.
You got to check it out.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We'll link to that in the show notes. So, final question. And I'm going to put a little twist. So usually when I have guests on the show, I ask, where do you see yourself and your company in 5 years? So I want to extend that a little bit. First of all, where do you see Minds in 5 years? And where do you see Twitter, Facebook, and the large social networks now in 5 years?
Mm-hmm. I'll start with them. I think that they're so big now that I don't think that they'll be able to get fully MySpaced, but they are going to lose ground, and what we're going to see is hopefully Minds and a fleet of other similar projects rise up to be at least competitive with the top networks, and then we're going to see the real battle take place. Mm-hmm. The question is, can we catch up to them? With thousands of developers and billions of dollars of capital.
Yep.
Because if they're smart, they're going to alter and stop us. But at the same time, there's room for coexistence.
Yeah.
That's why you have Facebook, Google, Twitter, LinkedIn, Tumblr, all of them.
Google Plus.
It's still there. It still has hundreds of millions of active users somehow. But I think we're going to see much more ability for coexistence, cooperation, federation, and so we're just going to be focusing on getting more competitive, increasing the reason for people to be on Minds, becoming further decentralized, trying to become more peer-to-peer, also refining everything that we have, just gaining community feedback. Like, that's how we develop. We just listen to what the community is asking us to build and fix, and we fix it. So I want to get better at being able to gauge and see clearly the sort of the consciousness of the community and what people want, so that we're sort of directly responding. And honestly, the community developers we're all just building it together according to what the community wants.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Great. The views and opinions expressed on this show are only those of its hosts and guests, and sometimes of no one at all. The CCN podcast was produced by Rockwood Audio and hosted by ccn.com. To find out more about CCN and the podcast, check us out at ccn.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CryptoCoinsNews. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to rate and subscribe.